You're listening to KYRS Medical Lake, Spokane 88.1 and 92.3 FM. Coming to you now, it's Long Waves. Hi, I'm Gary Krug. Thank you for joining me today on Long Waves with my very special guest, Stacy Causey from WAmend. And I want to tell you right at the beginning of the show that the opinions expressed on this show are solely my own and my guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of KYRS, its staff, management, or its underwriters. Today we're going to be talking about corporate personhood. We're going to be talking about the WAmend group. We're going to be talking about Citizens United, all kinds of fun things. Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gary.
It's nice to have you here. Now, when we were talking outside before Bob had wrapped up his show, you were talking about how you first kind of saw, as you put it, the game that's being played against us. You were a stockbroker, and what did you see?
Well, I was a stockbroker for 27 years, and for the majority of that time, I was a company gal. I read the company research. I recommended what they recommended. I diversified portfolios and did financial planning. And then sometime in 2006, this was the area of the subprime crisis. Things started smelling fishy, and I started turning over rocks that I hadn't dared to turn over before. And I discovered things that surprised me, and then I couldn't stop, and I kept turning over rocks, and I kept hearing things that I could connect the dots to, and all of a sudden things made sense on a totally different level than I had seen before. And so it was a huge personal and professional epiphany to realize that the world didn't work the way I thought it did.
Oh, you mean that big corporations like Morgan Stanley and some of the big, large brokers and banks weren't actually in the business of helping their clients. They were actually more in the business of helping themselves and their chief executives and their shareholders.
Absolutely, and that's saying it nicely. It's more that it is a game that we're the pawns in, and some of us recognize we're the pawns, but we're not sure that we know the rules, and we're not sure we have any other choices but to play the game. So it leaves us pretty unempowered. Yeah.
It certainly makes us feel that way, and yet, we have this notion that somehow, as citizens, we all have equal rights. As people, we all have equal rights. But some of these people are bigger people than other people. If we talk about corporations as people, then it strikes me it's very much like the old maxim, "It's every man for himself," said the elephant dancing among the chickens.
Yeah.
The corporations
Great analogy.
Tremendous power in finance, in
Absolutely.
lobbying, in control, in advertising, and we've seen a consolidation of that hugely through the 20th and into the 21st century. So how is this game played? I mean, how is the mark set up? And we're all the marks. There's another old saw. If you go to a poker game and you don't know who the mark is, it's you.
That's great, yeah.
So we're all the marks in this. We are the ones who lose liberties. We're the ones who lose money. We're the ones who lose control of our own legislatures and elected officials.
Yes.
And, we can look back at the beginnings of this and how it was set up through people like Ed Bernays and Walter Lippmann and the whole propaganda PR mechanism that emerged to sell America on this dream that's so taken hold of the legislature. What is that dream they have?
Oh, it's called money. It's called greed. And, it's the old thing, follow the money, and you will find huge profits. In fact, the Sunlight Foundation did a study late 2014, and they wanted to see how much the top 200 corporations actually, what was their rate of return for every dollar that they put into the marketplace. And what they found out actually stunned me, because the top 200 companies that were politically active, for every dollar they put into the political system, their rate of return was $760 back. Now that's stunning.
That is stunning. So they just buy the government.
Well, and our perceptions as well, and so if we are wondering why we don't have as clean a air as we want, or water, or environment, it's not that they don't hear us. It's not that they don't understand what our goals are. It's just too profitable not to. So.
Too profitable not to, yeah. So, and of course, so they do, because corporations are the sharks of the capitalist system. They swim, they eat. They swim, they eat. And the thing that's important to be mindful of is that corporations and capitalism itself are not philosophies. Capitalism is an economic system, and corporations started off as a part of the capitalist system, but they've become something quite different these days. It's not following the old. Everybody talks about free markets. Everybody talks about, get government out of business. And in point of fact, there are no free markets.
Exactly.
They're all rigged. I mean, like as when you were selling stocks and bonds, it's all rigged.
Yeah, yeah. And one sign of that. Years ago when I was working, you could easily go onto any of the big brokerage firms' corporate reports and find their trading results for the last 90 days. And, if it was a free market economy, they should be making money about 55% of the time, maybe 60% if they're really good. But when they're putting profits in 98% of the trading days, you have to believe the system's rigged.
You kind of do, don't you? Sort of like flipping a coin. If you keep turning over all heads, you've got to suspect the coin may be rigged, you know, or fixed dice or something. And one of the reasons corporations have been so successful in doing this is because they control the political debate, and they do that with money. And the big decision that set it all up, of course, was Citizens United, that gave corporations free speech rights under the First Amendment, unlimited free speech rights, except for one caveat, which was they weren't allowed to use their general funds directly to influence elections. They had to do it at arm's length from the candidates, as if the candidates don't know where the money, they can't coordinate the PAC activity with the candidate. But it doesn't take a genius to figure out how easily this system is gamed. And in fact, it is. There was a lovely article in the Washington Post back in 2014 where they said the court opened the floodgates to contributions, but far too little attention has been paid to the court's insistence that unlimited money must be independent. Many campaigns at the state and local levels are being run as if they never heard of this requirement. So the basic speech of democracy, the discussion of issues, is where?
Well, actually, there have been studies that say that the people, there were studies that said the preference, and I will quote this, there's a Princeton University study that said that public opinion has a near zero impact on U.S. law. There were two professors, one from Princeton University, the other one from Northwestern University, that looked at more than 20 years of data to answer the question, does the government represent the people? What they did is they took 2,000 public opinion surveys, then they compared it to the actual policies that became law. And what they found was that the opinions of 90% of the Americas have essentially no impact at all. In fact, I quote, "The preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy."
And there are, I think, a number of reasons for that. One is, of course, that citizens in this country do not vote. And it amazes me, the one point of control and input into the legislative system they refuse to exercise. Midterms tend to be around 35% participation. You're lucky in a big election year if you get anywhere near 50%.
Yeah.
And that's just appalling. Yet voting must be important because so many states are busy disenfranchising voters who would vote against the Republican and corporate parties.
Yeah.
So this is something of a conundrum. So we've got this problem. Corporations are spending stacks of money. They've defeated initiatives in a number of states, initiatives being the purest form of democracy, some would say. Where you put it to a direct vote of people, do you want this or not?
Yeah.
We've seen corporations buying ads, setting up and funding think tanks, so-called, that produce experts that go out and talk like they're independent, but of course they're not. And this is a big part of the corporate discourse, I think, anymore. So how does one begin to fix this? I mean, I look at this as one person and I think, wow, this is an enormous problem.
Gary, I think we have to start with recognizing and defining the problem as we see it. Because when you speak about the think tanks with so-called independent studies, we all as a whole think, oh, scientific data, okay, I can count on that. And we have to be smart to recognize that scientific data can be manipulated quite easily. And so we have to recognize, okay, who's paying for that data? And it may be several arms away before you realize you follow the money up. And so that's one fact. And the other fact, and these are all out of Bernays' playbook, is to follow when something goes wrong for a corporation, they don't let it slide. They attack and they conduct smear campaigns. And so once you see, oh, look at that, there's a smear campaign going on, then that's another trigger to say, okay, I got to look underneath there. I mean, I used to be like everyone else. Somebody would smear somebody, I go, oh, yeah, right, that makes sense. Now I go, oh, wow, what did they have to say? They who had everything to lose, just a person with nothing, there they are, versus a corporation attacking and smearing them personally and professionally. So I think the first step is seeing the game for what it is and being able to look past the smoke and mirrors. The second part, I think there's lots of levels here, but I think as people, we have free choice. We have free choice on how we spend our money. We have free choice on how we vote. We have free choice in how we handle our own selves and when we stand in our own truths. And so this initiative that we have is it's great because what it does is it hits at the heart of this problem, which is the fact that corporations have constitutional rights now, thanks to Citizens United, and they're misusing them. And to I think we have to think about it from the terms of, okay, so we the people in the Constitution have these rights, and what our goals are, universally, every person on earth wants clean air, fresh water, good environment, great economy. Those are all our goals. Corporations' goals are profits. And if they don't get the profits, the side effects are pollution, and the things that are against our goals. And so the two, corporations and people, cannot exist with the same rights, because corporations have more money than us, and they're sneakier on a lot of ways in getting what they want done.
Well, it is rather daunting to be an individual. An individual person, a natural person, and go up against a corporate person, which is fronted by millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars of PR firms, by banks of lawyers, by lobbyists, and there's over 450, I believe is the number, lobbyists for every representative in Congress, every senator and representative, and then, of course, the revolving door. So people from the corporations step in, they rewrite some EPA regulations, and then they step out, and they're right back in their job.
Right.
And there are a lot of these tricks that get played, and it does look daunting facing it. So you mentioned a minute ago, an initiative. Mm-hmm. Tell our listeners about your initiative.
And let me back up a little bit. I am not only a volunteer for Move to Amend, I'm also a volunteer for Spokane Moves to Amend the Constitution, and a volunteer for WAmend, which is the Washington State Coalition to Amend the Constitution. And WAmend is sponsoring an initiative campaign here in our state, Initiative 735. And what this initiative does is it reverses corporate personhood. And let me back up a little bit, because there's really two forms of corporate personhood. The first form is that which allows a corporation to do business and to sue and to operate.
And to own property. And they need that personhood. They need that legal right to do it, even though it's more than one person working in consort.
Correct.
Okay. And the other one?
And then the other one is where they cross the line and take our rights and basically use them against us. And it's not, it is literal, but it's not inaccurate to say that corporations have the constitutional right to buy our elections, and they have the constitutional right, that would be through the First Amendment, and through the Fourth, the Fifth, and the 14th Amendment, they have the constitutional right to harm our environment. And so what this initiative does is it reverses corporate personhood. It puts we, the people, back in the driver's seat and allows us to determine our future.
Now, what does this initiative actually alter? Because we're talking about U.S. Code, Article 1, Section 1, which defines corporations as, and I quote, personhood defined in determining the meaning of any act of Congress unless the context indicates otherwise. The words person and whoever include corporations, companies, associations, firms, partnerships, societies, and joint stock companies, as well as individuals. So we've got it right in the code. So every law that Congress writes, when they say person, it immediately includes corporations. We have Citizens United, which overturned a couple of bits of legislation saying, no, corporations have to have the same rights of free speech. And this was the real surprise, that free speech is money, the ability to buy speech. I always had trouble with that one, but I'm not a lawyer, and I know lawyers do things in...
Well, what our initiative actually calls for is to reverse corporate personhood in the fact of our constitutional rights, and the money is speech, that allows corporations to use money as freedom of speech to flow into super PACs and unlimited amounts of undisclosed money. So it reverses both of those issues, and it calls for a constitutional amendment to clarify that it should be living, breathing people that are entitled to the rights of the Constitution, not artificial entities. And those artificial entities include not only corporations, but labor unions and nonprofits as well. So it truly puts people back in the driver's seat. With, corporations, we're not against corporations. What we have a problem with is the top 1% of those corporations that are using those rights against the American people.
So it's really an issue of natural persons versus legal persons or corporate persons.
Yes.
But and we've seen this movement at least for 140, 150 years to eliminate that distinction, going back to the Supreme Court decision, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, where they said, oh, no, if you treat corporations different from people in taxation, then you're putting an unequal burden on them. And then we had a couple of attempts to keep the money of corporations out of elections. We had the Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce decision in 1990, which said you can't use corporate money from your treasury in political communication, but you could use special funds that you had on the side. But the interesting bit about that decision is it recognized a state's compelling interest in combating a, quote, different type of corruption in the political arena, the corrosive and distorting effects of immense aggregations of wealth that are accumulated with the corporate form and that have little or no correlation to the public's support for the corporation's political ideas. And that was one of the decisions that was overturned in Citizens United. And I think what really scared them was that statement, this immense aggregation of wealth, and that is the problem. So they can represent positions that are actually harmful to us. So Monsanto can advocate positions to put frankenfoods out there, to use glyphosates, to use nicotinamide pesticides, which are implicated in bee colony collapse around the world. Glyphosates we're increasingly finding out have a whole range of interesting toxic side effects in human beings and animals. But they can push these because they have the voice, and they can even convince a lot of people that it's a good idea. Mm-hmm. Do you remember when we had the initiative to put a small tax on soft drinks? Mm-hmm. Remember that? And the corporate lobbyists came out, and had this woman saying, I don't want anybody telling me what me and my family can drink. And it was, 1/10 of a cent per drink, which would have produced a lot of money for education and other needs. I think it was education, which is a perennial need in Washington, which is consistently at or near the bottom. I think we're 49th in the U.S. in per student funding. Good old Washington. Anyway, so there is this creep, if you will. And Citizens United was okay. They crept so far that finally they were able to leap up onto the top of the mountain and go, done. And
let me explain exactly how they use each of the amendments against us, because it's stunning when you realize what's happening. Under the First Amendment, we've kind of talked around, but that does allow freedom of speech for corporations. Of course, people have freedom of speech, but corporations can't speak and they can't vote. So what they've been allowed to do is set up super PACs, fund them with unlimited amounts of undisclosed money, and they use that money to buy advertising to influence our vote. And we have a specific example here in Washington State a couple of years ago with the GMO labeling law. And, whether you wanted the GMOs labeled or not, we had Washington state voters who put up $9 million to say, yeah, we would like to know what we're eating. Why wouldn't you label? And there was out-of-state multinational corporations through their super PACs put up $33 million to say, we don't want to tell you. And that was, an election that was clearly bought by the fact that they had our First Amendment rights. Monsanto has taken their First Amendment rights to the next level in that the state of Vermont, as a state as a whole, said, okay, our state, we want labeling. And Monsanto is suing them under their First Amendment rights of free speech, saying that they also have the right not to speak. So
negative free speech rights.
Exactly. But then you move to the Fourth Amendment, which is the right of the people to be secure against unreasonable searches and seizures. And there have been, and keep in mind that our system is based on case law, but we have a Riverdale Mills, which is a wire mesh manufacturer, sits on a river in Massachusetts. And the EPA received a phone call, an anonymous tip, that their wastewater treatment plant was not working. And so the EPA got a search warrant, went on the property, got the samples of the water to take it to court took the company under 2 counts of the Clean Water Act. And when they got there, the judge threw out the evidence because the company was claiming that it had the right to be secure against an unreasonable search and seizure, and that the EPA should have given them a phone call in advance to let them know that they were coming to collect evidence that could be used them in a court of law. It's wild. I mean, you get the Fifth and the 14th Amendment that take it even further. So in the Fifth Amendment, it says that nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor should private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And so basically, corporations have the same rights. They can challenge governmental actions against taking. And there was a Florida Rock Industries that wanted to mine 1,500 acres of the wetlands in the Florida Everglades. And the Army Corps of Engineers basically said, no, there's too much risk of pollution and habitat destruction, so please don't. And even though the company had the opportunity to sell the property for more than twice what it paid, the government could end up paying Florida Rock tens of millions of dollars for the lost opportunity to develop this property. Then you get to the 14th Amendment, which is basically, nor shall any state deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And so under the cry of equal protection, corporations can evade and overturn regulations while conducting business as usual. And so what happens is that there's a due process of 60 days to file a claim against polluting, and the corporation has 60 days to reply, which they take, and then they correct it in that 60 days, and then you have to start the clock all over again. So these are not things that support people, our environment, or people's goals. These are things that support corporate profits, and so they are using these against us, and it's really up to us to say, we're the only ones here left who are going to say, no, enough is enough.
I believe it was in the film The Corporation that there was an interview with an economist, a very pro-corporate economist, who was saying, really, everything that happens, all the damage they do is in economics referred to as externalities. It's not part of their business. It's not part of their plan. They don't have to concern themselves with it. And he actually made the suggestion that the the only way that you could get corporations, the only way you could eliminate pollution and corporate damage would be for corporations to own the air, the water, the land, and then they would have a vested interest. And I thought, this is mad. This is the most insane thing I've heard a person say. But he was quite serious, and that is very much the mentality.
Yes.
That everything is there to be taken. There are no restraints on the acquisition of cash.
Yeah.
And this goes back to that old libertarian idea of individual free will in the pursuit of happiness, or more correctly, wealth. So it does put us rather at a disadvantage with all of these people, with all these corporations. It's interesting that the thing Citizens United did was remove the idea from law that there could be a distorting effect of this immense amount of money that you could not account for. And it's so disingenuous the way they use the 14th Amendment, which was designed to protect freed slaves, the way that they use this distorting effect argument to say, oh, you're discriminating on us for no legal reason. Well, of course, there's no legal reason. It was just overturned. So, they say, well, if you can show some kind of quid pro quo. There was the piece from WAPO that I was talking about earlier had such a staggeringly good quote in the end of it here, where this is the Washington Post editorial board talking about one example of a political action committee working at arm's length from Florida Governor Rick Scott. Florida Governor Rick Scott has appeared in multiple television ads that have been paid for by an organization called Let's Get to Work. The group's name is also a Scott campaign slogan. What a coincidence. So the basic legal limits that you can't buy candidates, you can't give money to candidates, is directly undermined in this, and it becomes an open bribery. We don't call it that, of course we never do. Treason never profits, and here's a pretty reason. For if treason profits, none dare call it treason. And that's the bit we're back into here, I think. So it seems to me that this bit of money in politics goes far beyond Citizens United, goes far beyond just talking about speech, because then we have this whole bit of lobbying. We have the whole bit of undue political interest. We have the revolving doors. We have failure to disclose. We've made getting elected so stupidly expensive that only corporations can afford to buy a senator.
And let me jump in here, because what would happen if corporate personhood were abolished is that I know it would prohibit all political activity by corporations, which would include all corporate lobbying. It would prevent corporate mergers and prevent corporations from owning stock in other corporations. It would allow for the inspection of environmental or health violations without a warrant or prior notice. And it would require labeling of genetically modified foods. So there's a fair amount of concrete, specific changes that would occur, but Gary, it's not the whole problem. And one of the things I think we have to recognize is that as citizens, we've been asleep in the back seat of this car for some time. And, the corporations are driving us off the cliff. And so we have got to figure out a way to get back in the driver's side and back into a position where, number one, we can tell a new story, and that maybe we have some power and maybe we have some say as natural people. And so far, a lot of us believe, why try? It's too powerful. I can't even fathom how we would go about doing it, but we have to. I mean, this is not, and I do want to interject here that this is not an issue. Here in America, we think that we're two parties, the left and the right. And this is not a left and a right issue. We have two parties, but it's the super rich and all the rest of us. And they do a great job at making us believe that it's a left or a right issue. And
dividing us.
Dividing and conquering. And so this is one thing that we really have to recognize. It doesn't matter what party is in power. It's the super rich that calls the shots. And we are the pawns in that game, even if we support their supposed ideology. We're still pawns. We may support them, but don't ever go thinking that they support us. So it's just the way I look at it.
No, I quite take your point. I just want to take a moment here and say to our listeners who may have joined us late in the show that you're listening to Long Waves with Gary Krug, and I'm here with Stacy Cossey from Move to Amend and WAmend and all the other Amend groups in Washington because they're all working together. So the idea is you pass a referendum, you get a statement in Washington state law on
actually what it calls upon is our Washington state legislature. This is an initiative to the legislature. We actually have through the end of the year to collect 330,000 signatures to get it on the ballot. It goes to the legislature, and they have three choices. They can either approve it right then and there, which actually we don't want. We want it to go to the ballot. We want it to be a popular vote. The second choice is they can move our language directly through to the ballot. And the third choice is they could amend our language somewhat, which means that the ballot would have two competing languages. And so that would happen in November of 2016, which would be presidential election year, the most expensive year in history by far. And so this will be an issue on everybody's minds. But it would actually ask our delegation from Washington to recommend to the U.S. Congress to put in a constitutional amendment to clarify should be living, breathing people that are entitled to the rights of the Constitution, not artificial entities. And that includes corporations, labor unions, and nonprofits.
So you're calling on the state to begin the process of amending the Constitution, which is one of the two ways it can be changed, either through a convention or by an amendment of the states. So there are other states doing this too?
Yeah. Actually, once we pass this, we join 16 other states, and by then, actually, it could be 17 because I believe Arkansas is working on the same thing right now as well. I know.
Arkansas, really?
Yeah, I know. And Montana already passed this. So it is a movement that has some legs. There are over 200 members of Congress. I already mentioned the 16 states, and there's 550 cities and towns, and even the president that are already on record in support of an amendment. And just to expand on that, in the Republican state of Wisconsin, Scott Walker's state, there are 3 cities that passed corporations are not people, money is not speech initiative by 64, 69, and 80% of the popular vote. So that's a huge movement.
It is, and it seems like 16% is moving very much in the right direction. It takes, 2/3 of the states to to call.
And then
for an
3/4
amendment.
to ratify. However, of all of our 27 amendments, they've all occurred without having a convention. Congress actually saw, okay, maybe we need to do something, and they did it before that point. So
okay, that puts it into a frame for me, so I can see that this is a step to move state legislatures, build coalitions, build support, build
Yes.
awareness and
Yes.
knowledge, so that people will prevail upon their state
Yes.
legislatures, which are sometimes a little more amenable than the people in distant Washington, to enact or join this process of amending the Constitution. And is there specific language that is being proposed by Washington Amends or WAmend or
Well, yeah, I mean, across the United States, what's interesting is of those 16 states, there is a band. You know, you have some states that have only said, you know what, money should not be freedom of speech. They haven't gone to the extent of saying corporate personhood. There are other states that have done both. And in fact, it's my understanding in Oregon, they did money is not speech, and they're realizing, oh, okay, we need to do the corporate personhood now. So now they're going back around and trying to bring that in as well. But I think what's most important to recognize, Gary, is that we're taking on corporate control. Mm-hmm. And to do so, we have to have a movement of people. We can't remain asleep in the back seat and expect to succeed or succeed in a way that will be beneficial to us. We have to stand up and realize, you know what, we are in charge here. Enough is enough, and I'm going to step up and do what I can. And that's what's so interesting about my campaign is that we had a decision on a statewide level about whether to hire paid signature gatherers or not. Mm-hmm. And we decided we wouldn't. And we decided not to because we know it's imperative that we start this movement. And the movement is probably even more important than this initiative because what people can do when they're involved and active and engaged and have knowledge is incredible. And so I have volunteers. I have a retired heart surgeon. I have a retired nun. I have a retired school teacher. I have counselors. I have arborists. I have all kinds of people who are coming together and saying, okay, I'm out of my comfort zone here, but I have to do this. And so tell me what I need to do. And so and that is, I think that's an important phrase that we need to remember. I'm out of my comfort zone because, frankly, our comfort zone didn't work, and we all have to get out of our comfort zone.
Well, it seems one of our big problems as a nation is that's all we do is people sit in their comfort zone. They watch their TV. Occasionally they may read something, a newspaper. Newspaper readership's declined enormously. Television news is saccharine. And I've talked about this on the show before, the interlocking boards of directors and interlocking interests of most of the mainstream media guarantee you're going to get the corporate story, that you're not going to get these kinds of stories. And that's why it's good we have things like KYRS, and other community stations and other outlets like that to get these stories out. But there's it's quite a road you're on here. How long do you think how long do you think people will stay asleep? What will get people to actually turn off their TV, to actually learn at least as much about their government as they know about football or basketball? At least, be able to name, the three branches of government, even a couple of the Supreme Court justices, to be able to follow with some attention their own affairs, and they don't do it. They sit on their duffs.
I think I have pondered that question a lot, but I think let's backtrack a little bit to answer that, in that if you think about what's a healthy, strong country, one where children are fed well and nourished. Well, you know what? In Washington State, 23.1% of the children are go hungry at some point in their life. And okay, so maybe it's happiness, and people are happy, engaged, and you know what? 18% of the U.S. population is on anxiety drugs, or maybe it's that here in our country, people are engaged creatively in their passion and their job, but you know what? 35% of Americans need some governmental assistance, and I'm not meaning that demeaning to those people. I'm saying the system is set up that way.
And it is amazing that our own Kathy McMorris Rogers, who enjoys such support from her district, is opposing a lot of the remedies to help people in poverty, to help people without enough food, without housing. And her district contains the poorest parts of Washington State, the highest percentage of use. Yeah. And contrary to what people see on TV or hear on Fox Radio, it's not black inner city people, it's white people overwhelmingly, and it's not who use these benefits, and the benefits themselves are part of the department of, the agricultural part of the budget, which in its entirety is less than 2% of the budget. But hey, let's spend more money on wars. Let's go bomb another country. Let's turn Syria into another Libya, because that worked out so well. And that, getting people to kind of stick their heads up and go, wait, no, this is madness. We've been manipulated with patriotism. We've been manipulated with threats. Yes. We've been manipulated with the opiate of the saccharine entertainment, and this appealing to people's most banal interests. And we've raised a lot of people who really just don't have the kind of support that would give them that independence. And I think this goes to the question of communities. Absolutely. Communities are, and we've gotten so far away from, communities and relationships in families and local communities that we're not even sure how to do that anymore. I mean, we can operate with proficiency our iPhones and our computers, but to be able to talk to a spouse about important issues is pretty scary. But that is what feeds us, and that's what supports us, and that is how we are going to overcome, is look around and recognize just how strong this inequality is, and what we need to do against it. I mean, when you think about that in 2012, the incomes of the top 1% rose 20%, whereas the remaining 99% rose 1%. Or when you realize that 5 major banks pled guilty to criminal charges, and the whole thing was that they ran a book and they ran the foreign exchange currency markets for profit. It's the Libor rate and things like that. Yeah. I mean, basically, these bank executives are not going to jail, but we have our teenagers being locked up for selling ounces of marijuana. And, there's this huge inequity there. And we shoot people for the crime of being black. Exactly. On the streets. There's a great
And I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a great study on inequality using monkeys that just made me laugh. And the researchers had two monkeys side by side, and they trained them, I give you a rock, you give it back to me, I'll give you a cucumber. And they both got cucumbers. And, cucumbers were okay, but they were treated equally, so they were fine. Then they decided to they gave one monkey a grape when they gave him a rock.
And grapes are better than cucumbers.
Grapes are definitely better than cucumbers. And the other monkey was immediately attached. And immediately, instead of, what we tend to do in America, we might have thrown the rock at the other monkey. This monkey threw the rock at the researcher and said, I want my grape. And spoke out against this inequality, this disparity. And the point being is that this disparity, some people will get apathetic and do nothing, and other people will start Occupy movements and do something. But eventually, people talk together, and I see that when I'm outside the grocery store collecting signatures. I'll get some people that'll go, oh yes, and they practically grab my pen and my board out of my hand, and they thank me profusely for being out there. And then I have a fair amount who don't know what I'm saying, but they'll sit there politely, and then they'll go, oh my goodness, corporations have our rights, I didn't know that. And then I have a group of people that won't even stop, and they don't even know what's going on. And I've thought about that, and I've realized those are the people. That's why I'm doing this, because they don't know. And in this case, what you don't know is already hurting you.
Indeed. What we don't know is already hurting us. We got about 5 minutes left in the show today. I know you're looking at me like, oh my gosh, where did the time go? That's the way it is on live radio. It just flies away. It always looks like such a big chunk.
Yeah.
But, back to this issue of community, there are so many wedge issues that are introduced, that are pushed, that are funded, that are financed. These issues of race, these issues of class. Yeah. Ooh, look at the Kardashians. Why would I look at the Kardashians? Look at the rich people. Why do I care about the rich people? I find my neighbors infinitely more interesting than these people. But this is the bit we've lost in the structures of community, of structures of subdivisions and cities that we build, in the elimination of common spaces, in the elimination of activities that we would do in common. These things we have lost, and we need to reclaim these. And the kinds of activities that you're doing would be so much easier if we actually had communities.
Yes.
I've been to my precinct meetings, a couple of times. There's nobody there. There's a handful of old people, generally. Where are the young people? Where are the people who want to actually be getting input and control into political parties? That's where they start. And they don't know it. They don't care. There's a PlayStation. There's a porno. There's something, some shiny object to distract them.
And then that's why we are a community, because there are those of us who are naturally ahead of the curve and hold the space while others go, okay, and move forward. And I feel like we have to, as a community and as a people, start telling new stories. We have to tell ourselves we can do this, and we have the right to do this, and we are empowered, and we can get along. And those are the stories that we've got to tell so powerfully, because that's where it starts. And we are the ones that we're the superheroes. We are them, because it's up to us. It's not going to be the corporations that do anything. It's not going to be the government. It's not going to be the politicians. It's the people.
And the key thing is that it is people doing. I remember an anarchist line: to change everything, start anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a good place to start, because it is building a momentum. It is making people aware of issues. It is accessing the one real form of political power that citizens have, and that's in the legislature, in voting, and in referenda. And I know I have arguments with friends sometimes who don't like referendums. Referenda, they think it should be the other way, but it really is very direct.
Yeah.
A very direct form of telling a legislature, nope, this is what we want.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
And you can either vote for it, or you can give us your version and we'll choose between them, or you can just, pass this thing. But it is a wonderfully direct form of democracy, and it takes, I'm glad there are people like you out there driving these kinds of issues. So if people wanted to get hold of
Yes.
Move for Amend, what do they do?
Thank you for that question. Go to www.WAmend.org. That's WAMEND.org. And there there's a button where you can volunteer, you can donate. And you can also go to our local Facebook page, Spokane County FOR, F-O-R, I-735, and that would connect you with me. I am actively looking for volunteers. It's a lot of work for a lot of people, and as with anything, there's a few of us that are doing a majority of the work, and with anything, many hands make the load light. Mm-hmm. And so yes, come out, and I just have to say it's probably the best therapy I can do is be out there and do something active, collecting signatures. So
that's wonderful. So I'll put that information on the Facebook page for the show as well, which, as my listeners no doubt know, is Long Waves Radio. Easiest way to find is put it all in quotes, Long Waves Radio, 3 separate words. On Facebook, you can email me at longwaves@kyrs.org. As always, we're live streamed on the internet from the KYRS studios, and the shows are podcast on YouTube. Again, just in quotes, look for Long Waves Radio. You'll turn it right over. Stacy, thank you so much for being on the show today. We've gone through our 55 minutes of show, and I'd like to thank our listeners again for joining us. This has been Long Waves Radio with Gary Krug, and you are listening to KYRS Medical Lake in Spokane, 88.1, 92.3 on your FM dial. Until next week, have a good one, stay safe, stay smart, and get off your duff and get involved. Till later. Bye.